you so much for being on Resilient Retail. I am so excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be really good for the audience. Can you start off by telling anybody who might not know who you are, kind of who is Jeff Staple and what do you do?
Sure. Hey everyone, what's up? My name is Jeff Staple. I do a couple of different things. So I'm the founder of a company called Staple. One of the things that we do is we have a clothing collection called Staple Pigeon. And our icon is a pigeon. Our mascot's a pigeon. I'm actually wearing a shirt here so you could see Staple. This is our Hello Kitty collaboration. So that's not a pigeon. That's actually, I just found out that Hello Kitty is not a cat. You cannot call Hello Kitty a cat. It's not a cat.
What?
Yeah, Hello Kitty is not a cat, as per Sanrio.
So just a kitty, but not a cat.
It's Hello Kitty. It's a she. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So Staple Pigeon's the clothing line. It's been around since 1997, so it's 23 years old. 23 going on 24. And then I also have a creative agency that I founded right around the same year called the Reed Art Department. So REED Art Department. And you could check out their website, readartdepartment.com. I also founded a retail store, one of the first of its kind in terms of sort of lifestyle, street culture, sneaker culture, youth culture, all mixed into one kind of like retail presence called Reed Space, REED Space. And we eventually expanded that to like Tokyo, Honolulu, Singapore, Hong Kong. It started in New York City. And then also, I have a podcast as well. It's on Hypebeast, and it's called The Business of Hype. It's where I talk to creative entrepreneurs who are doing similar things in this sort of industry, but really talking much more about the realities behind the dreams that they've built versus like, it's less so like follow your passion and do your thing that you love, and more so like how much debt did you get into, how many credit cards did you have to max out, how many times did you get sued, and things like that. So it's much more of a real deal talking peer-to-peer kind of interview series, and we've interviewed like over 100 guests at this point now, so it's fun. Yeah. And then I do I do talks and lectures about youth culture and stuff like that, but I'm glad to be on here because I rarely get to just focus in on retail. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I am super excited because like you mentioned, you have this really long history in a lot of different things, but retail being kind of almost the center of a lot of things that you did. Before we get into that, I know that, even for me, it's kind of a new thing that I've learned about. Can you explain what kind of the sneaker streetwear culture is and why it's so powerful and how the industry has kind of boomed in the last so many years?
Yeah, so I'll give you the Streetwear for Dummies 101 course, the crash course.
Perfect.
If you sort of rewind back to the 80s, right, there was these subcultures of, and the big subcultures then were hip hop culture, skateboarding culture, and punk rock culture, right? And I think anyone that I speak to, when I say those terms like hip hop, skateboarding, and punk rock, you immediately get this vision of like a person in your mind, right? Like you can picture this person that's into these cultures. And they were very segmented and similar to like when you would go to a record store back in the day, like if you went to Tower Records or Sam Goody, there would be like the rock section and the rap section and like the jazz section and the punk section. And they were very segmented like that. And then something happened in the 90s where people started to blend all of these things together, right? So like, Black kids from the hood who were traditionally wearing like baggy clothes and only listening to rap were now picking up skateboarding and wearing like tighter fitting clothing. And then rock kids were wearing baggy clothing. Like, and there was just this mix happening. And then you had people like Eminem and Linkin Park and Jay-Z linking up. And then Pharrell started skateboarding. And then Kanye started wearing luxury brands, so there was just this redefinition happening. And that to me is really what street culture is. It's the mixing of all of those cultures together. I predicted this 10 years ago, and I said that street culture would be bigger than all of those other cultures combined. And it is. Yeah. Street culture is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if you factor in sneakers as a major component of street culture, then you could add another $100 billion into that. Sneaker culture, as most people know now, has become this global phenomenon that's just incredible, from a secondary market to a collector market to a super fandom market to a vintage market, and then there's an inline market. I mean, like to be where like if you owned more than 10 pairs of shoes, you were kind of like a weird person. And now I think it's quite normal for people to own like 15, 20 pairs of shoes, you know. I personally stopped counting after 3,500. So like I'm up in the 4K number, which is not even that crazy. That it's not like there's people that have 10,000. Like I know people that have 10,000 pairs of shoes. Yeah. So it's like it's just become an industry unto itself, and that's kind of what street culture is today. And you could see it from the super high end to the super like mass market, Walmarts, Uniqlo's of the world. Everyone is influenced by street culture right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it goes all the way from like, the Yeezys and Yeezy walking down at like a New York fashion show down to there was this whole period of time where and it's still kind of going on, where even fitness influencers on Instagram were all wearing Adidas and MDs. And so you can see how it, it can go from this, like, it's a range between the very, very hyped people who have 3,000, 4,000 shoes that are pristine in boxes, to the people who kind of just dabble in it.
Yeah.
Which is what's so interesting, I think, about all those cultures coming together to create a new one.
Yep.
Is you can almost have more people that are touched by that community.
Yeah.
I do have to ask, just what I'm guessing a lot of listeners are going to be wondering, where do you keep all your shoes?
Oh, it's a whole logistics process. So I have about like 200 in my home. Okay.
Yeah.
They're all in their original boxes, and there's a little Polaroid picture taped to the front of them. Because when you get to 200 shoe boxes, you don't know what's in them anymore. So you need a little Polaroid. So I have 200 in my home, and then I have about 10 that are like in front of my doorway that are the regular weekly rotations. And every 2 weeks, I will put the 10 away into the 200 and then find the new weekly rotation. And then every month or 2 months, I will send a bunch of the 200 into a off-site storage facility that's fireproof, waterproof, heavily insured. And that's what I call the archive. And there is the 4,000 plus. But it's really well cataloged. Like, so I can look up a box number, like box number K186, and I will know exactly what shoe is in that box. And so if I ever need a shoe, sometimes I need shoes for like exhibitions or press or something like that. I know exactly, like, call in box number 186, and then I'll know that shoe is in there.
That's amazing. Yeah. The level of organization there is like, I'm an organized freak. So that just almost is like, I want to categorize my closet, be able to filter it online.
There's a very fine line between highly organized and a hoarder. Right. And I don't want to ever cross into Hoarderville, but like, yeah.
As long as you're categorizing, you're not a hoarder. Right. I think you're still good.
Right. Before you know it, you'll have like dead cats in your sneaker collection. I don't want that. Like,
we don't want to get there. No. So let's get into the retail side. Tell us about the journey into getting into retail with Reed Space. What was the experience? How did you guys enter it? And why was your focus on building a brand in physical spaces instead of, say, digital or some other way?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story, actually. So back in the day, this is now 2000, the year 2000, right? I was selling my brand Staple to various local shops. And some shops were big. Like, for instance, we were selling to Urban Outfitters, right? And we were selling to mom and pop shops. And what I found was that when your clothing line has like a deeper conceptual message and it requires some more explanation, you can't really rely on other retailers to do that for you. And I don't blame them. They're carrying 20, 30, 50 brands. And I remember like I would go in and secret shop some stores that I would be carried in. And I would be like, hey, tell me about this brand. And the kid working, he gets paid like $8 an hour. And he's like, I don't know. We just got it in. And I'm like, damn, I don't want my brand represented like this. And I remember I went into Urban Outfitters and I saw my shirts like on the floor because like, people rummage and then no one picked it up. And I was like, I'm picking it up and dusting it off and putting it back on the hanger. I was like, man. And I had a lot of other friends who also had streetwear brands and they had the same complaints. So we always just sort of pipe dreamed like it'd be so great if we opened the store in our way and like we did it our style, and we really told the stories and represented like the concepts behind our brands properly. So in 2001 I was in downtown New York City, and I had my office and studio there, And lo and behold, 9/11 happens, right? September 11th, 2001, that tragic day happens. And that directly affected my business because I was literally in the shadows of the World Trade Center at the time. I was below Canal Street,
Wow.
And after that happened, if your business was below Canal, you couldn't really access it all the time. Power was going out all the time, and it just wasn't a place to do business anymore. So I had to leave. And if I recall, I think New York City even offered sort of like a fund to help people move out of that area. So I took advantage of that, and it was like, I think it was $10,000. It was like barely anything.
Yeah.
And so I found the space. I was actually looking for new office space, but I found this store space. It was a ground floor retail space in the Lower East Side of New York City, so still downtown. And I called them up and I was like, I remember I was paying $2,000 a month rent prior to that. And this new space that I found, which was going to be Reed space, the rent went to $8,000. So it was a 4X increase. And I had no business plan at all for opening a retail store. Literally the only business plan was me and my friends saying we should open a better retail store. And that was the business plan. And so what I did was I took one half of the ground floor space, made it the design studio, put a curtain down, and then on the other side was the retail store. And that was Reed Space. That was how we opened it. And so we opened in December of 2001, 3 months after 9/11 in downtown New York City. I mean, you talk to any business advisor or bank and they'll be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like no one's coming down here. But we did it. And I sort of rationalized to myself that if I can make this survive even and break even, like post 9/11, I'll be good after that. And we ended up staying in that same location for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You talk so much about the storytelling aspect of your brand and other streetwear brands. What is it about streetwear and sneakers that require that storytelling? And why is that so important and powerful?
It really is the most critical aspect of it. It's the most important thing. And it's actually not only streetwear, it's really any fashion. If you think about like a t-shirt that you might buy at Walmart or the Gap versus the t-shirt that I'm wearing now, if you really break it down like to a scientist, the only difference is the artwork that you're putting on it, right? It's a different embroidery. So whether this says LV or Staple or nothing and it just has Old Navy, it is literally the same thing. The only difference between the things are what they mean and what they mean to a culture of people and what they mean to a niche and what a creative director or a designer embedded into that design and the meaning behind it. If you strip away the meanings, then you just have a commodity item, So and same goes for footwear, right? So you could go to a dollar store and buy like a $9.99 pair of sneakers, and if you cut it up and shred it up, they're basically the same. Sure, like Nike and Adidas might say there's extra technology and there's extra this and that, but like Nike's technology is literally air, right? And Adidas technology is like foamy boost, which it's just a different shaped foam, but it's really all the story that's behind it. And you know what? Some people will say those stories are superficial and, they're bullshit and it's all smoke and mirrors. But you know what? Those stories actually, they have a direct effect on people. Like those stories are the reason why like Michael Jordan can dunk from the free throw line. It's because he feels empowered. It's why LeBron James just won the championship. If you told LeBron James, hey, in game 6 of the finals, we're going to put you in a pair of these like just regular Costco sneakers. They're the same shoe, but his mentality is messed up now. He's like, no, I don't have my, thing on. And same goes for like, I was just talking to Hassan Minhaj, who has that show. He's a comedian, has a show Patriot Act, and he said that when he did the interview at the Daily Show, and also when he did his White House Correspondents' Dinners, he always wears Cole Haans because Cole Haans make him feel like he can just take on the business world, the finance world, and it's his lucky shoes, you know what I mean? And that means so much. So it does have a lot of inherent power, and that's really to me what street culture is all about, is like making people sort of believed that with creativity and design, they could kind of like almost do anything, and they could achieve anything. You know, you look at someone like Virgil Abloh, who's now the artistic director of Louis Vuitton Men's. You know, he came from the streets. He came from Chicago, not into high fashion at all. Now he's sitting at the top of that pyramid. And so that's all because of his drive and his belief that he could do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you guys had Reed Space open for 15 years, multiple locations. What happened to then it becoming closed and you having to close the doors of Reed Space? Was it a forced business decision? Kind of what was that journey with retail between, you know, starting the one store and then expanding into others and then eventually closing 15 years later?
Well, when I opened Reed Space in 2001, e-commerce was very, very limited. Like not everyone had their own e-commerce platform. So there was still a lot of brick and mortar retail happening. And quite frankly, I never believed, and I don't think I still believe that human interaction, that sort of neighborhood feeling of like gathering in a place and like just chopping it up and having conversations with people. I don't think that could be replaced yet digitally. You know, you could have forums, you could have Reddits, you could have comment sections, but that's not the same as just, you know, face-to-face interaction. Yeah. And, you know, I guess as the 15 years advanced, I will admittedly say that I probably didn't take advantage of e-commerce as I should have. Like if I stopped investing into like in real life activations and instead invested in an app or like a mobile e-commerce store, maybe Reed Space could have weathered the storm longer, you know? But we were getting hammered by just online shopping and you know, kids would literally walk into our store. I remember the shift when like in the beginning, like let's say 2009, kids would walk into the store, they would shop, and then they would sort of secretly look stuff up online while they were shopping to see if they could find a better price, you know, and then they would walk out. But come like post 2010, the kids were just audacious. They would just walk in and be like, do you have this? And can you beat this price? And if not, they just walk straight out of the store. And it's like, damn, like they're just price shopping. Like even if it was like literally 5 cents less, like if we had something for $40 and a store had it for $39.95 and free shipping, they'd be like, yeah, I don't want to carry it around today, so I'm just going to order it online. And they weren't even like they weren't even like embarrassed about it. They weren't even like, they didn't even feel bad about it. They're like, nah, I'm just going to order it online. It's like, okay. and the best part is they'd be like, but can I try it on to make sure I got the size right? So they would try our shirt on, you know, spend our customer service time and then order it somewhere else. And so that's when I realized I was really sort of behind the 8 ball. And then there was some issues with our landlord that happened where like, you know, our lease had run out after 10 years and he kept trying to get us to renew the lease. He was trying to increase the rent. And so after 15 years, it was a really hard decision to close the store. And quite frankly, a lot of that time was spent me dwelling on my ego of like maintaining this thing, you know, and like just sort of like keeping up with the Joneses and making sure that like everything looked great. And even though rent was due, bills were piling up, I was just trying to like make it look good. And then eventually, you know, we had to close it. And it was a hard decision for me to make, but very, very quickly after that. And, you know, I'm wondering if any retail business owners who are watching this are sort of going through a similar dilemma. That feeling of shame went away so fast and it immediately became relief. Like I'm talking within like 2 months, it was like the biggest burden off of my shoulders, you know, and it's bittersweet because I still think that retail is one of the best ways to be able to tell a story and to communicate with a you know, a community and a culture. But what I ended up doing was taking the learnings that we had from 15 years of operating a retail store and rolling that into a capability of our creative agency. So now Reed Art Department has like a division that specializes in retail. And so we help other retail stores. We creative direct merchandise and oversee some of the special events that stores need in order to stay unique and relevant.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about kind of this transition from owning a highly successful retail store, creating a Nike shoe that created quite literally a mob frenzy around your store. And now you're running what is kind of revered as one of the most exciting and successful visual communication agencies in the world. What strategies specifically do you think you've taken from that retail experience that you're now using with a lot of the clients you're working with?
This is what I'm going to tell people who have a retail business. If you are relying strictly on people who come up to your cash register and ring up orders, if that's the only way you're making any income, you need to pivot. You need to pivot. I mean, that's like, how I equated it is like, it's like magazine business, right? And if your magazine was strictly driven off of newsstand sales, you're in trouble. Like, you have to figure out, obviously the most obvious one is advertising, right? You got to get advertising in. And then now magazines are like almost like mini agencies. So beyond advertising, they sort of execute campaigns, storytell, creative direct photo shoots. And I think retailers really have to put themselves in that position where, to me, the transaction of ringing somebody up, that should be the tip. Like, that should be cherry on top. That's the tip jar. Everything else should be, you should put yourself in a position at a retail store where brands want to pay for your space. Think of your retail store as a billboard that is open 24 hours a day because of e-commerce, because your windows are there, your window displays, and make your store engaging enough so that when people walk by, whether you're open or closed, you stop them in their tracks. And if you're able to do that, brands will pay for that real estate, And the other thing is, if you can show to a brand your ability to connect to a consumer like no one else can, and your ability to speak to a consumer, brands want that. Brands need translators in order to talk to their consumers, because brands are so busy building their products, and their headquarters are usually thousands of miles away from like where their customers are. They need people on the ground who actually know what's going on in the streets. And if you're a store that actually can communicate with like a niche, no matter how small, to be honest, it doesn't even matter how subculture, how niche it is. In fact, sometimes like the more localized it is, the more valuable you are. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Nike, you would assume they have everything figured out. But I'll tell you, they didn't figure out Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania and Topeka, Kansas. And if you've got the 500 most influential people in Topeka, Kansas coming to your shop, there's huge value in that to a brand like Nike.
Yeah. And going back to kind of like these concepts of streetwear that we talked about, where streetwear retail stores especially were really good at this, really good at the in-store experience, good at pop-ups and experiential retail. How are you taking those strategies and then applying them to these massive brands you're working with, like Hello Kitty and Nike and Fanta and all of these esports you just worked with?
Yeah.
How do you take that kind of background that you have in these strategies and then kind of repurpose it into digital or for something that's not just a retail store?
It's actually pretty easy for me. And the interesting thing is those strategies were developed out of a necessity. We had to come up with those things because we couldn't afford the billboard at Times Square, and we couldn't afford the double page spread ad in Vogue magazine, right? So we had to figure out some other way. This idea of like doing drops, which everyone talks about now. It's like just dropping products randomly versus doing seasonality. We had to do that because we couldn't afford to keep up with the fashion calendar. So we did drops out of a necessity, and now years later, drops is like Tommy Hilfiger's trying to do drops. So like we did out of necessity. And then to answer your other question, which is like, how do I sort of translate those learnings into like larger corporations? It's like I said, it's actually really easy because I just go with. I mean, it sounds super cliche, but I just go with my gut. If a client is working with us and they have an idea about how to drop something, I really use my BS radar. Like, I have my BS antennas up, and if it feels off, I have no problem telling them that like, this is not cool. This is not authentic. I'll tell you a different way that might be more authentic. And I've said this more than once to some clients. I was like, dude, you are a 60-year-old man with 4 kids and you live in a 2-story house with a white picket fence and a station wagon. If this is cool to you, we're failing. Like, if you think this is cool, we failed.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry to say that, but like,
yeah, we've missed the mark here.
Like we have to make something where you don't understand that. Like, if you say, I don't get this, we've won. We're winning. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like these sort of senior guys, these like, CMOs and EVP, they're like, I don't get this. That you're not supposed to get it. Like, I don't want you as the customer. I want your kid as the customer. Yeah. And when is the last time you and your kids saw eye to eye on something?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's that extreme dedication to the actual consumer and not just kind of what is said to be right or what the industry tells you is right.
Exactly.
And something that I want to pull out from what you said was a lot of these strategies that you guys came up with came out of just a dire need to do something different because you couldn't keep up with the big players and the massive billboards. And I think there's a similarity going on now with the pandemic is there's all these retailers, the bigger ones who have money, they're able to go start an e-commerce side, kind of get that stuff rolling, stay alive during the pandemic, and then they're able to shift a lot of stuff here and there. But on the flip side of that, there are a lot of small retailers who don't have that opportunity and don't have that kind of massive budget to test and learn. And so they're kind of flying by the pants of their seat.
Seat of their pants.
Seat of their pants. There we go.
Yeah, that's the other one works too. Pants of their seat.
There we go.
Yeah.
Pants of their seat. We got there. And so what would be your advice on, back then it was very much, okay, how can we differentiate the experience when you come shop with us or the storytelling we're doing? Is that still something that is differentiating small retailers? Or what would your advice be to someone who is looking at this competition and saying, okay, I got to find some way to stand out against the crowd. What do I even do?
Yeah, now it's, the idea of shifting to online and having an app now has become very, very democratized, right? With like Shopify or Squarespace or any of these, like you could literally have an e-commerce store like within minutes nowadays. You don't even need one. You could do it on Instagram now. Like it's all just there. So it's less about the complexities of starting an e-commerce store nowadays in a post-COVID world, in a sort of new civil rights movement kind of world that we're living in, where everyone is very conscious and woke. I think the brands that are succeeding are the ones that have like a true voice and are actually offering a message. I think that consumers they're not like, we're not in a Great Depression, so to speak, but they are very, very conscious about where they spend their dollar. And what I've noticed right now, and we're in sort of Q3, Q4 2020, I've noticed that it's not about if something's too expensive or too high end or too low end. They just want to spend money where the company and or the founder resonates with their beliefs and messaging, right? So that could be something really expensive. Things that are like, my friend has a brand that has bags that go for like upwards of $1,000, and his business is off the charts. And he said, like, people still believe in what I do, so it's not like that they're trying to hold on to their dollars and save their money in their mattresses. We've had a great 2020 as well. Like, knock on wood, it's been incredible this year. And I think it's because I'm out there talking about what we believe in as a brand and as a corporation and as me as a founder. So I would say to somebody who is a small retailer, that's the one thing that you don't need a massive budget for. Like if you can just stand on your soapbox and explain who you are, what you do, and what means something to you, what is important to you, people will listen to that. And it might only be 20 people today, but if you have a dynamic message and it's passionate and authentic, I guarantee you those 20 people will turn into 40 people by next week. And those 40 will turn into 80, and then you can start building a community from that. But to just expect to just put stuff up on a rack and hope people walk in and buy it just because it's a great deal or you're doing a 2-for-1 or whatever, like, right now you just have to have a message and a statement or else you just should go home.
Yeah. And the data actually shows that this is what's happening. There is data out there that proves that most consumers are now trying to shop local and they want to save the businesses in their local community.
Yes.
And it comes down to when they're picking even those businesses, okay, which ones do I relate the most to?
Yeah.
We're seeing it a lot. Consumers have the power now to choose where they shop and how their money affects things like the environment, like societal issues, racial issues, all these things that are going on. And so to just kind of be quiet in it now is no longer an option.
And
but I hope the listeners are getting some like almost hope out of this message, because as a local retailer, you kind of already have this power. Like you have it ready to go and you're not trying to take some massive corporation and bring it into one central message.
Right. And there's really no excuse now because of the power of social media. Like, trust me, I came from a time where a campaign meant like making a high-res photo shoot, taking it to Kinko's, making postcards, then getting on a bike and passing postcards around to local cafes. I'd make 5,000 postcards because that was the minimum, and I'd have to like send out all the like it would take days and it would cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, even at a really small scale. And now with all this free social media, and free is, I know they're taking away your identity and your mind share, but it is financially free. Like you can literally start a campaign like while sitting on your toilet. I hate to say that, but it's like, that's how easy it is. And for a business owner or a shop to say like, I can't do it, or I don't, like there's no excuse. Like, yes, you can. Yeah. Like we did it under much, much tougher circumstances. And now it's right there. Just say something and people will listen.
Yeah. And just to follow up on this, actually, just this week of recording, you actually launched a new collaboration and it has a very unique story to it. I'm just going to read the article headline that I saw that is, to get Jeff Staples' latest sneaker collab, you have to vote.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about this? Because I love it. I think it's a really amazing idea. And I'm just curious to hear the story behind it.
Yeah, me and this really well-known shoe customizer. His name is the Shoe Surgeon. He's got over 1 million followers on Instagram.
Love that.
Yeah, he basically is known for like cutting up and restitching together shoes. We worked together to create this highly covetable shoe. And we're just trying to harness the power and energy that we see in these kids collecting shoes, lining up for days for shoes, reselling shoes. And we're saying, what if we offered that same carrot, but in order to get that carrot, instead of just waiting outside of a store, you just have to vote. That's it. And we're not even, if you look at all the communications that we're doing, and I suggest you guys check out this website called justvote.xyz that we built, which is an all voting informational sort of portal that we made.
Amazing.
We're not even telling you who to vote for. I don't even care who you vote for. Just vote. Like, just get out there and make a decision. And I'm trying to cut through the browbeating that society is doing. Is like, you should vote because of this, that, and they're like that's great that that's happening, and I want that to continue to happen. I'm doing it in a little bit of a more subversive way, where I'm going to say, hey kids, do you like this little shiny thing? If you want to come into this voting booth, and then we'll give it to you, And I'm hoping that, the satisfaction that young people get is that when they vote, they get this feeling of like, wow, I've made some change, and that feels good. And I think there's like something addictive about that, like that ability to make change. And that's what I'm trying to incept into their minds and sort of plant the seed in there. And it's cool. So like you go to justvote.xyz, and then in order to enter our shop that we've made, you actually have to take a little quiz to show that you've been paying attention. So if you answer the quiz right, that gets you into the shop. So this could have happened, quite frankly, in real life. Like if we actually had a real store, we could have like made kids take a test or fill this out or show their mail-in ballot in order to get into the store. That would have been a dream. But in this COVID world, digital is like the great sort of replacement for that, So it was really fun to be able to work on this. Yeah. And so it runs from now until election day.
Wow, that's amazing. And again, it's understanding your customer. It's understanding what motivates younger people, which isn't always the media saying you got to vote and our parents like hammering us that we need to vote. It's this respect for, okay, I have this view that voting this year is extremely important and we need to get the youth out to vote. And also balancing that with, but I can't just tell them to do it. So how can we creatively work within our brand, within our products, and create kind of an environment that attracts all these things together?
Yeah.
And clearly works. It's a recipe that works.
Yeah, we did it during when George Floyd happened and Black Lives Matter erupted. We knew we wanted to give back, and so I called two of my friends who are legends in streetwear. One is named Hiroshi Fujiwara from Tokyo. Another is a graffiti artist from New York named Futura 2000. We came together and we put this sort of like dream pack of collectibles. And we did this Black Lives Matter T-shirt. And for every dollar you donate, you are entered into a raffle in order to win these prizes. We ended up raising over $180,000 in a day.
Wow.
Whereas if I just told kids, donate to the ACLU.
Just go donate, yeah.
Like I incentivized them. I made it a game. I gamified it for sure. But it got kids excited. And we were able to do a lot of good in a very short amount of time. I mean, we really put that together like in a matter of weeks, and it's just fun to like sort of think like just shoot from the hip and just think like off the cuff, like, okay, this is happening in the world. Let's react right away. And that's something that I missed, quite frankly, in having a brick and mortar store where like you sort of had to, I think because just by the nature of having nuts and bolts, you just had to get stuff fabricated and made, and you had to think through logistics and security and lineups and all that stuff. And now digitally, it's like the Wild West. You could kind of just experiment. If it doesn't work, you could just take it right down. You know, you could just pull it down. You can make edits on the fly. You know what I mean? Like I remember back in the day when you had a store, you'd have to put up like vinyl signage on the glass. And it's like, if there was a typo, oh my God, you have to like go back and get it all done. Like, now it's just like, oh, there's a typo on your caption. Okay, it's fixed.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So you mentioned nuts and bolts, and I'm going to make the weirdest podcast connection here, but you said the nuts and bolts of an operation. And now I think because I have you, I have to do kind of a Jeff Staple challenge, right?
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is take one of the most kind of, in its essence, unexciting retail industries from a visual standpoint and ask you to brand it. Okay.
Okay.
So let me tell you a story.
Okay.
You are Jeff Staple. You just moved to a small town, and you just bought a local hardware store. The owners were selling it. The inventory is great. Pricing is great. Your general business health is great. But there's obviously not much of a brand there at a hardware store. And a brand new Ace Hardware just went up 2 miles away. So now you're looking at it and you say, okay, we got to create some sort of a brand here that brings the town to my store. Yeah. So what do you do for Jeff Staples and stuff?
That would be a dream of mine to have a hardware store, by the way. I would totally nerd out on it. I think
it's built right into your name. You could really do it.
Totally. Yeah. Office supplies and stuff.
There you go.
No, I think that's a great exercise. I think two things come to my head immediately. One thing is to humanize the business that you currently have, right? So the one thing that Starbucks and Ace Hardware cannot do is humanize themselves, you know, and I would make sure that the founding story, the year you're founded, the dad that started it, the grandpa that inspired the dad to found this hardware store, I would blow that up completely, make it all about that, you know? And I think, quite frankly, that tugs at people's heartstrings, their emotional heartstrings, to be like, man, that's such a great story. If I need to buy a screwdriver, why not support that local business, you know?
Yeah.
And then the number two thing that I would do, and I would totally nerd out on this, is actually educate the customer on the most basic things. So imagine you did a whole month-long campaign about the history of the bolt. Like, who invented the bolt? I want to see like a 300x blow up of the first bolt schematic. I want you know what? Turn your hardware store into a museum. It's actually, don't even think of it as a hardware store. Think of it as a museum. And then the hardware store is the gift shop. So this month's exhibition is the Phillips screwdriver. Who the hell is Philip? I want to know who Philip. Yeah, I want to know who Philip is. And then when you finish the exhibition, here's our selection of Phillips screwdrivers.
Yes.
That sounds so fun. Some hardware store, please call me. I will definitely help you with this.
Somebody please call Jeff. I know that the second my husband hears this episode, he's going to be like, oh my God, why is there not a hardware museum? Like that would be his dream to go to one of those.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, just one final question before I let you go, Jeff. What does resilience mean to you, since the show is called Resilient Retail?
Resilience to me is fighting and working like there's no tomorrow, you know, because actually there is no tomorrow guaranteed, as we know in this crazy world. And I think everyone should work and dedicate to their craft like it could be their last day, and sometimes people are doing things where if they hit the lottery, they might like quit that day. And I would say if you're in that position where someone says you've hit the lottery and like you want to quit, like you should probably change what you're doing, because if I hit the lotto, I would just do the same thing tomorrow because I actually love what I do. So if you could figure out how to do something that you're passionate about, that you're really invested in, then the resiliency actually comes as second nature. Because even in the worst of times like this year, so much BS has been thrown at us as business owners and entrepreneurs. I'm just fighting. And it's almost like a game for me to figure out how to strive on top of all this crap that's been thrown at us. So it's less about resiliency, more about just like, I just want to overcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you too.
And thank you for doing my silly quiz. I thought it was a very good answer. Thank you for coming and sharing all your wisdom. You are an inspiration to so many people out there, and we really appreciate your time. Can
I tell people how to connect with me?
Yes, please do that.
Okay, so if you want to keep up and connect on Instagram and on Twitter, I'm at Jeff Staple, no spaces. Our website is Reed Art Department, REED artdepartment.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You could follow me and let's connect.
Awesome.